Good evening, KZFR. This is Kevin, your main host of Write.onair. Hopefully you all are having a good night tonight. This is going to be a pretty cool show, but before we begin, I want to let everyone out there know that you can submit to the show at write.onair@gmail.com. You can also contact us through Facebook or my YouTube, although that would probably be the longest route to get in contact with us. But if you want to be part of the show, we are always in need of submissions and new writers and stuff like that. And as you all know, this is a place for writers. So there's no critique here. It's just kind of an appreciation show. But with that in mind, I'm going to let Natalie do the intro to our cool guest tonight. Here you go, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. We're sitting down tonight with Alondra Adame. Did I say that right?
Your best.
Okay. We're really excited to have her. She's currently a Chico State grad student in the English program, and she's also a published author. How are you doing, Alondra?
I'm doing good.
All right. Well, did you want to go ahead and jump into the pieces, or did you have anything you wanted to shout out?
Oh my gosh. Everything, but also I just want to get started, but everything is great.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. This is called Blood Spills on Desert Soil. I read aloud the line, blood spills on desert soil, and I know they know what I mean. I can hear their breathing begin to quicken, the blood in their veins rushing stronger than before, and its heat makes their cheeks glow pink. We are no longer reading words on a page. We are standing in the heat of their shame. We are watching crimson red seep into sand. I cannot hold their hands in the borderland. I cannot give them the comfort they crave. I cannot tear them from the guilt of 5 words.
So where'd this piece come from?
This piece actually came from another piece, which is really weird. Mm-hmm. Like the line blood spills on desert soil is from another piece that I wrote for a class. And I realized when I was reading it aloud in class that everyone got really awkward about it just from that one line. That one line said everything that everyone needed to know. And it felt so strange. Like I could picture myself being there with them, but also being in this whole other place that in reality doesn't exist, but exists in my head. And I thought that was amazing.
Okay, well, did you want to describe what the poem's actually fully about and then the borderlands that you're speaking of specifically?
Oh, I'm 100% speaking about like the U.S.-Mexico borderland, just because of everything that's gone on there. And it's hard for me, just like as someone who's a child of immigrants, to think about everyone else who's coming through and everyone else who's experienced so many terrible things along the border lately. And I know that my place could be there. I just happen to be here much earlier.
So true.
Yeah.
I like that line. We are no longer reading words on a page, like the moment it becomes real and kind of like, oh, this is happening right now. Like there's no difference there. This is a really good piece.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is the one that got published in, it looks like, the University of Miami.
Yep, the University of Miami's Mangrove Journal. It's their undergraduate literary journal.
Way to go. Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a really big deal. It's the first time ever. Hopefully not the last time.
That is a really big deal. Like, let's take a moment that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like, I feel like so many people who told me about writing were like, you're going to get rejected. Like, you just have to be ready to be rejected. And I was like, it would be cool just, if even one of them, like, who cares? I just want to write, and that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's on a radio show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, that's a surreal experience right now.
Well, let's dive into your second piece too. We'll keep moving right along.
Okay.
Yeah. And did you want to get, like, this is the poem that has the line from the first poem in it, right?
Yes, this
I
is.
thought I recognized that when I was reading it.
This is exactly it. I thought it'd be interesting to do it second.
Cool.
Okay. So this one is called Gracias a la Virgen y la Puta. Tontancin y Malinali, Virgen Maria y Malinche, mother of all that is, and mother of my mother's mothers, beloved goddess and indigenous slave woman, la Santa de los Rebeldes, Madre de la Revolución Mexicana, waves of golden sunshine emanate from your Holy Spirit, while the moon humbly bends itself at your bare feet. Blood spills on desert soil, and your palms part to caress another child of the sun, wailing into your emerald robes. La chingada, sangre de mi sangre, madre de los mestizos. Did you know the importance of your imprisoned womb, the beginnings and ends of cosmic matter contained within the child you bore? Did you love us in spite of the manner of our conception? Somewhere, another woman raises a fist and grins. The echoes of your whispers fuel her fighting spirit.
Beautiful. There's something very like prayer-like about this poem, and I love that you have the sangre de mi sangre, madre de los mestizos.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm wondering though about the beginning, the references. How did you say that?
Tontantzin.
Tontantzin y Maliani.
Yes.
Who is that?
Okay, so this is kind of going back into like my English major side because I took Chicanx literature. So I learned about like these two major figures, which in reality had been around me my whole life because I've been around, Mexican people my whole life. And so I've heard, all of these sayings, except I never knew where they came from, except for, the Virgen Maria, the Virgin Mary from like Catholic religion.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side, which is La Malinche. So like whenever, Mexican men cuss, they usually use like, La Puta. And so that means like the whore. And essentially she was the original indigenous woman who had a child that was a mestizo, so somebody of Spanish and native Mexican birth. And so she was, mother of my mother. She is the beginning of, essentially my people.
Yeah.
And I found out through, school that La Virgen was actually Tontantzin, which was an Aztec goddess. And so for them, that's their Nahuatl names.
Yeah.
So that's their original names. And so that original name always got watered down and watered down and watered down. But there's such important figures that I was like, I need to talk about them. Like, I need people to know where they come from, where I come from, really.
Yeah, it kind of, the poem itself, when I first read it, I thought it was about Mexico itself, just the idea of indigenous history, and then these gods, goddesses kind of being covered up with more acceptable religious icons like Virgin Mary. And so that's kind of what it made me think of. But this is the poem that had a negative reaction when you read it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I would call it negative. It was just shame, Yeah. Like, I felt like people felt shame about avoiding these topics most of the time. And so, in a class where you're workshopping, like, there's no escape.
Yeah.
You have to sit through it. You have to feel that shame. You have to feel all these emotions. And you can't hide from them. And all of your emotions are out for everyone to see because in a workshop, you're all looking at each other.
Yeah.
And when you're the reader, you can see everyone even more.
Yeah.
And so I could see all of those reactions to just that one line.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
So going back to the first one, this is the what makes them all blush, and it's their shame they're feeling, right? Towards the history.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful. Yeah.
I do my best.
No, thank you for bringing those topics up. It's important to talk about them.
No problem.
Yeah, I like especially, we don't often have a lot of authors, to my memory, I guess, that root their writing in a lot of like very, very real things and things that are happening now, and then things that have happened to like the start of a people, essentially, which is what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah,
it's definitely deeply rooted in like colonization and everything. And like even the changing of the names, it's to something that's more easy for whoever the colonizer says. So, they start out as Nahuatl names and they end up in Spanish. So that changed too. But also, it ends on a happier note. Like women like me who learn about it and get empowered by it, like we're able to draw strength from it rather than, be sad about such a violent history.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, let's get into your next piece. I'm really excited for this next one.
Yeah. This is not as, rooted in history, but it's something personal to me. This one's called Unsent Letter to Ellena. The sky looked like one of your landscapes this afternoon. The swirls of peach and lilac reminded me of the time you dyed your hair lavender for fun, and the baby pink satin point shoes sitting in the corner of your messy painted stained bedroom. The way the colors spilled behind silvery clouds reminded me of the nights we'd spend lounging on the white comforter you gave me for Christmas. Your quilts always I messed up on that part. Your quilts always smelled like oil or acrylics or charcoal, the afterbirth of one of your new pieces. It reminded me of the lazy summer days with our feet in the creek, treating overgrown tree roots like recliners, taking turns reciting our favorite poems. Beaming over Neruda, I still didn't know how you felt then. Blushing over Faudet, I knew I wasn't confident then. You started painting my poems. I should have known then. It was back and forth creation, give and take appreciation. One of our last trips was to Half Moon Bay. I stood alone amongst sandy tourists and driftwood, stretching the morning out of my muscles, watching you dance into the salt water. Your hair was bleached blonde and grown long, and you let the waves crush around you, grasping with foamy embraces to take you away.
I'm not sure if this is me putting myself into this or not in my interpretation, but this is somebody that you loved or cared about, right?
Oh yeah, I love her very much. Yeah.
Is it a friend or is it more?
She's a friend.
A friend?
She's like
Okay.
one of my best friends. You met her actually.
Did I? Oh, I did meet her.
Yes, you did.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have the zine for you,
Mm-hmm.
Ellena.
Yeah.
Okay, this is absolutely beautiful, beautifully written. It's almost like this ode to this phenomenal person in your life.
Yeah.
And there's a line in here, though, that I just loved. It was, your quilts always smelled like oil or acrylics or charcoal, the afterbirth of one of your new pieces. And it kind of ties into this give and take appreciation, this back and forth creation that you're talking about, and this idea that two people are feeding off of each other's creativity. I just thought that was genius.
Yeah, we've been best friends for a very long time. We grew up in the same hometown, and we both felt very similar about so many things, except her outlet is art and my outlet is writing.
Yeah.
And so when I see her pieces, they make me want to write because they're so beautiful and they're so full of emotion, and I just want to capture it. But it's the same way for her. When she reads my work, she wants to paint a new piece. And like, it's insane to see how like two mediums can express the same emotions.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what this is about. Just we spent like just such long days hanging out and having a good time. And then she moved, which was super sad because it was such a great momentum. And obviously we love seeing each other all the time, but you know, there's a disconnect once someone's long distance.
Not to mention that a lot of artists and writers, I guess, won't ever really get to see the reaction of what they're creating. And so having someone that you're super close with and then able to see that interaction is a really, really wildly cool and unique thing. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're both lucky enough to be essentially chasing our dreams, which is, you know, me becoming a grad student, writing, getting things published. And for her, she's going to do her BFA in art, and she's going to create more pieces, you know, get into galleries. We're both incredibly proud of each other.
You'll have to collaborate sometime and
Oh, for sure.
make an art show of some sorts.
Ooh, I love it.
That would be neat. So do we have any more poetry to get through?
No, that was the last poem.
Okay, so for those of you who are listening now, we kind of went through these a little bit fast because there's a longer piece we wanted to touch on the end. Are you still good on reading that?
Absolutely.
Cool. Let's dive into it then.
Okay. So this piece is titled Yo Soy Chicanx. Chicanx feels much better than Mexican American. That hyphen in the middle feels so separate, so distant, the same way some Chicanxes feel from both identities. A professor from UC Irvine in 1990 once wrote that a Chicano lives in the space between the hyphen and Mexican American. This was a time before the widespread use of the gender-inclusive Chicanx, but still somewhat true nonetheless. To be Mexican is to be born in Mexico, which many of us were not. Some of us have never been to the motherland that our families speak of with nostalgic sighs and the Mexico lindo y querido attitude that our communities clutch tightly to their chests, like the San Marcos blankets from the flea market. We know nothing of what it means to be grown there. Some of us have vague memories of a smaller, blurrier life before coming to the United States. Recently, I went to the Mexican Independence Day Festival with my parents for my father's birthday. Surrounded by the men in charro outfits and the women in peasant blouses taking part in El Grito, I sat with a headache and counted the minutes until my father tired of waiting for the banda to stop and his beloved mariachi to begin. My mother asked me why I felt so uncomfortable and why I didn't get the feeling that my cousins feel at these events, that feeling of exaltation that so many people in this dusty fairground shared. I told her that I didn't know what I should feel. I love the music, the abrupt trumpets and the delightful sounds from the guitars. I love the food, the constant presence of something hot and spicy or warm and sugary. But there was something missing from inside of myself, which reminded me that I didn't actually know how I fit into the whole picture. There were social customs that I couldn't mold myself into, and certain Spanish words sat on the tip of my tongue that I couldn't formulate smoothly enough. I wasn't born on the rancho like my father, and I didn't get the chance to spend months in Mexico like my cousins. I was always here. To be American is a complicated feeling for many Chicanxes because of the Mexican culture we've been given by our parents to carry on our names, our hearts, and our various cultural experiences. But Americans in the United States, just to be clear for those who recognize the fact that North America contains the United States, Mexico, and other countries. Often, the fact that North America contains the United States and other countries often remind us of the complex nature of our identity. If we speak Spanish or even a dialect, we hear, speak American, speak English, don't speak Mexican. When we say our names with a tone or accents that have been instilled into the pink fibers of our tongue, we hear, well, that's too difficult to say. We'll call you a different name. And then my cousin Beatriz becomes Betty. Cut out the Z's and the rolling R's and the I's that sound like E's, and you get the dead tongue name, which is easier for others to say. I got lucky with the name Alondra, since there wasn't a good way to chop it up into nice little pieces. But it's rare to hear someone say it correctly the first time. We hear these things, but when we enter high school and encounter white people trying to teach us our language, we are bombarded with, oh, how do you say this? Your name sounds so much better in Spanish. You should always say it that way. And the dreaded, can you teach me how to say this bad word in Spanish? Look, until you start backing me up whenever these white kids call me names, don't ask me for advice on how to conjugate this verb. We hear these things, and yet some people might stop and think, dang, Alondra, why don't you translate all these Spanish words so I can understand it easier? The reason is simple. I don't owe you a single thing. When my mother and father came to the United States, they not only learned English, but they also learned American Sign Language in order to communicate better with my deaf older brother. In fact, the whole reason they immigrated to the United States in the 80s was to make some money and enroll my brother into special education services that Mexico wouldn't even be able to compare to for at least another decade. Do you think Americans would forgive my parents for mispronouncing words or forgetting a word? They call us horrible and demeaning names, but then get mad when we decide to speak in our familiar language. The dominant culture in the United States, which is most often white Americans, no hyphen, will always remind you of your place that is settled within the hyphen that they gave you. I am a shining fragment of the mirror that reflects your true self, America. You created the hyphen, not me, and I do not owe you a single thing.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I love this entire piece, the ideas that you're presenting here, and so clearly too. And even the idea of the hyphen holding a space and being that space in between two things, that uncertainty of identity. I identify with that so much. I'm mixed race, and I never know where I fit in. And sometimes some sides are more accepting than others. And I really love this piece so much.
Not to mention, I kind of almost wish this piece had its own show right now, because there's a lot to unpack in this. The ending, "I don't owe you a thing," is probably like the most powerful kind of like, not gut punch, but it feels that way, because that is a very prominent line. Like, "I don't owe you anything. I'm here trying to live my life just like you're trying to live your life. There should be no radical differences here, and why do you think you're entitled to my knowledge?" You know, what a like amazing little end piece there. And all of this is so good. The fact that like this is just a story of immigrants coming to try and better their lives, which is, you know, almost 100% of the cases out there, I would say.
It really is. I mean, like, my whole family is a testament to that, you know. At this point, only 2 of us have made it to grad school. Even fewer of us have made it to college, but, you know, we're all trying to better ourselves in some way or another, whichever way that is, you know, getting a job, providing for your family, going to college. I just happen to be the one that can write and articulate it to other people. And I think in one way that's kind of a privilege, but in another way it's almost a duty. And that's the difficult thing, is to separate what feels like your duty, but in reality, no one's privileged to, you know, the inner workings of your life. It's up to you.
Would you say that maybe you found, because I think one of the other pieces we talked about was you trying to figure out where you fit in the culture?
Oh, yeah.
Would you say that this has become the place where you fit in, kind of carrying on these words and telling how you see it, you know? Yeah,
I feel like, you know, for me being a Chicana, so like a U.S. born person of Mexican descent, it's different for everyone, because I've met so many people, you know, they prefer Mexican American, you know, they think that actually sums up, you know, their experience, and that's totally fine. But for myself, it's so much more complex, because I don't have the full experience of living in Mexico, you know, being in Mexican society, being in Mexican culture, since I've always been in the United States. You know, a lot of my cousins have had, you know, the fortune to go and experience it all, you know, stay for a couple months, but I just never have. And so I've always been here, and like predominantly in very white spaces. So I've experienced American culture at like what I guess you could call its like most height in a small town that's predominantly, you know, conservative and white, while I'm so different.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Sutter, California. So it's only about an hour from Chico, near Yuba City.
So it was... Oh, Sutter. I thought you said Southern.
No,
I was
Sutter.
like, so it was predominantly white in Southern California. Wow.
Nah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. How has it informed your life in other ways, being surrounded by white people?
The weird thing is it's always influenced how polite I am. Like, politeness politics is something that I'm really interested in, because I spent my whole life, you know, trying to be not Alondra, just be someone who's accepted by other people. But in reality, like, once you become the person you are, there's no reason to pretend for anyone else. You're better off just being who you are. And like, that's the biggest thing too, you know, my name's Alondra, like, no one's gonna nickname me Allie. And if they try to, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work at all. And so when we were younger, my cousin Beatriz, a woman that my aunt worked with, started calling her Betty because she couldn't say her name. And so she's been called Betty forever. And it's only recently that she's actually started to accept the name Beatriz. And she has Beatriz everywhere. You know, she has her full name, you know, Beatriz Adame. And it's like an empowering thing for her. And for me, it's always been like something I've been stuck with. It's like a brand on me almost. And it's only recently that I'm just like, yeah, that's me, that's my name. You have to say it how it's said. Like, I don't take it whenever people try and say my name incorrectly or try and, you know, push it away as if it's not a big deal that everyone gets nicknames. But in reality, it's not. It's my name, and you need to learn it.
It'd be like me calling you Kevin instead of Kevin.
Just all the time.
All the time. Yeah, I can see that would be rather frustrating.
It is.
I also wanted to point out to a really interesting kind of idea behind this piece that I noticed. A lot of people, when they talk about like their heritage or their traditions, at least from what I've seen, will just adopt it and not question why they've adopted it, or if they've even gone to the country or done anything like that. And this piece takes a second to kind of go, well, I haven't been there, so where do I fit in this? And I think that is a really like amazingly mature standpoint to take for like trying to figure out your place in the world. Like, where have I been? What do I know firsthand? Because I can jump onto the bandwagon of my entire history and all the stuff that you talked about in here, and say, well, this is me, this is my identity and stuff like that. But is it? Because you weren't there. So this is a really cool piece about, or at least like as I'm reading it, finding where you're supposed to be. And that is so, like, this is such a, there's so much to this piece. I wish it had its own show.
Yeah.
We'll have to have you back again and talk about this.
It's crazy because this is actually part of a longer piece.
Yeah.
And so there's like more incidents and like
Part
examples
two.
of how it's been.
Yeah, I really hope that you do come back on. I think I remember Alondra read this at 1078, right?
Yes. 1078 Gallery for Chico Speaks.
Yeah, do you want to describe what that event was exactly?
Oh, okay. That was an event, and it was for like the whole Chico community, so anyone could come. And I read this piece, and other people who were there were like Alex Brown, and like they had brought up issues that were prevalent to our community, so the campfire and everything like that. And they were amazing. They were great too.
Yeah.
But my experience with it, it seemed to like educate and like open up a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
But also it brought up like a question that I've always found super important. Someone asked me how I feel about educating other people about, what Chicanx is and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I think my response was something along the lines of like, it's not my job to educate you on something that you can look up.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that, because for so long I've wondered where that line is and when it stops being our job as women of color to educate people.
Yeah, like it's tiring. It's very tiring.
It's exhausting, and code switching is exhausting.
It is. I think, rest in peace, Toni Morrison. I
Yeah.
love her. But she said something about how racism is exhausting. You're constantly behind because you're always explaining yourself. You're explaining your culture. You're explaining everything about yourself just on a daily basis to people who have access to the knowledge and just don't want to take that step.
Yeah.
And it tires me out too, which is hilarious because that's like the main subject of so much of my work. But at the same time, like I can't spend all day explaining to each and every person what my entire experience for my whole 22 years of living has been. And so that's why I write, because it's like, hey, look it up, go over there.
I'm so glad you figured it out much sooner than I did, that you are allowed to be yourself.
Well, we're at the end of the show, and I wanted to ask, and I think you've answered it in a couple ways here, but to other writers who are possibly in a similar, I guess, like situation as yours. So I would say like from having parents who are immigrants and stuff like that, trying to figure out where you fit in culturally. What would you tell them as a piece of advice to start writing about that?
I would say pick one of the most uncomfortable and the most secretive parts of your life and try and write it out as best you can, because the more painful it is, the more there is to unpack, and the more worth it is once it's actually out there. And it's going to be scary, but it's 100% worth it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Man, this show went by like lightning.
Yeah.
It
Natalie,
did.
Yeah.
real quick at the end here, I know you have an announcement to make
Do it. Oh.
for Zine.
Yeah, it's a Zine Fest, September 28th. But I just want to thank you, Alondra, for coming on and reading this stuff and talking about things that are important to our entire community, because, yeah, people need to get informed and
Indeed.
be kind.
And these things are important, and the more discussion we have of them, the less uncomfortable they become, I think. But thank you very much. It is Alondra.
Alondra.
How close was I?
You did it.
Close. Yeah, you
Okay.
did it.
Cool. Fantastic.
Yay.
I unfortunately will not attempt your last name. I apologize. Thank you again. It has been wonderful having you on the show.
Thanks.